Hey everyone, and welcome back to the React series for beginners. In this episode, we're going to go over building multiple pages in a single React application. This isn't the 90s anymore, so practically every modern web application is going to have multiple pages that users can navigate between. This allows you to actually expand your React knowledge to create a full-fledged web app that has multiple pages and many moving parts. To make multiple pages and route between them, we're going to use something called React Router. React Router is a React library that just gives us a router component that we can use to build routes between different pages, but all within the same application. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we do anything, we need to install this React Router library into our program because it doesn't come with React by default. So to do this, let's go ahead and open up a new terminal, which we can go here, this plus button in our terminal. Let's just open it and it'll open up a brand new terminal. And then inside this terminal, let's just type npm I react-router-dom. Exactly like that. npm is just the node package manager we're using to handle packages, I stands for install, and React Router DOM is a library we're grabbing React Router from. So we'll go ahead and just press enter and make sure this runs. To start, let's navigate to our app.jsx file, which we're already in here, where our main code lies. Right now, we just have our leftover code from our previous episode. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a new folder in src called pages, and I'll make another one called components. This way we can organize which JSX files are full on pages and which JSX files are just components. So to do that, I'll just go in here, new folder. Let's just call one folder components, and then let's make another folder, and let's just call it pages as such. So what I'm going to do is take all the JSX files that are currently components. I'm just going to cut and paste them into our components folder here. So we have, for instance, buttons a component. I'm going to control X and then control V in here. And I'll do the same thing for the other ones. So we have button sections, also a component. Let's cut and paste that one in there. And then we'll do store item, text block, and then we will get text blocks. And now all of the actual smaller components we have should be inside this components folder. And normally I would just like control X these all at the same time. But I noticed sometimes if you try and like cut and paste all at once, it messes up the import lines on top of the files. So I just do them one at a time. And now that we've put away our components into this components folder, the only files we're left with are app.jsx, main.jsx, and then the two corresponding CSS files for them. Now, I went over earlier that main.jsx is just the entry point for React, and it's where React actually renders the app. And then app.jsx represents the application itself. Right now, app.jsx is basically like a page for us, but since we're wanting to make a multi-page application, we should instead treat app.jsx as if it's the place that houses all of our pages. I'll show you what I mean by that in just a moment. First, let's make a couple of pages inside of our actual pages folder here. So I'm going to make one. I'm just going to call it home.jsx. And then I'm going to make, let's say, page 1, page 2, and page 3. So we'll do page 1.jsx. We will do page 2.jsx. And then we will also do page 3.jsx. And keep in mind, even though we're putting these in their own pages folder, these are still actually React components themselves. They're just going to be our parent components that have many smaller components inside of them. Normally, you'd want to be more descriptive with your page names, but for now, we're just going to do page 1, page 2, and page 3, just to make it easy for you to show. Off camera real quick, I'm going to make some super basic pages that just have some simple JSX tags in them. Okay, so I've just quickly filled out each of these pages. And as you can see here, all I'm doing on each of these pages is just returning a header tag that says which page it is. So home pages, this is home page, this is page 1, this is page 2, and this is page 3. So it's just super simple JSX. Now let's go ahead and navigate to our app.jsx file. And we have all of our leftover code from the previous episode, but I actually don't want to use this right now. So I'm going to take literally everything in this file, and I'm just going to cut and paste this into page 3 for right now. So I'm going to actually delete this here, do it like this, make some tabs here. And then now we'll have everything that we had in the app file. We're just shoving it onto page 3 for now, just to make room in our app. And before we do anything else, let's make sure to take the imports that we're using from app as well and put them on this page. So let's go ahead and import like use state, for instance, from React. And then we need to import, I believe, button and then store item. So we do import button. And then we just want to do import store item like this. Let's go ahead and save this. And let's go ahead and go back into our app file now. And then now just to clean this file up, let's actually go up here and let's delete every single import we have besides the actual CSS file. So we're basically completely emptying this file out to make room for the routes we're about to build. Now let's do what we came here to do and actually build our routes with our pages. So let's import what we need first. So the first thing we want to do is import the hash router from React Router DOM. So I'm going to write import hash router, and it should pop up right here. Press enter, and it'll automatically import hash router from React Router DOM. And then I actually want to import two more things from the same exact library. So I'm just going to use commas. I want to import routes, and I want to import route like this. And just so we don't have to specify hash router every single time, I actually am going to say as router here. That way, this will be an alias for hash router, just so we can type router out. Now, because each of these imports are from a React library, we can treat them as components when we use them. And real quick, I'm just going to go ahead and make more room here, just expand this. So here's what each of these actually does. Hash router, which we are calling router, is the component that we need to wrap our entire app in, and its purpose is to create the routing environment. Routes here, this argument here, is a component where we can specify all the potential routes of our router. And then lastly, route here is the component we use for each individual page, which we can wrap within our routes component. If that sounds confusing, let's make it clear by actually implementing it in our code. The first thing we need to do in our app component is just specify the return function because we deleted it a second ago. Let's just go ahead and write return like this. And then the next step is to write our router component. So to do that, we will just write router like this, and then it'll autofill the closing tag. And then inside of our router component here, all we want to do is write routes like this. And again, it'll autofill the closing tag. So now we have router, and then inside of that, we have routes. Next comes our individual routes that we can specify. So for each route, we need to make a new route component using this route component here. So to make our first route, let's just go ahead and write route like this, and make sure we're not having like an opening and a closing tag. We just have like a singular route tag here. So we make sure we have this / and then this here. So there's two arguments or props that we need to pass into each one of these route components. The first one is path, which just specifies the URL path, and the second is element, which is just the page you want to render that URL path. So first, let's specify the path. So as a prop, just like any other prop, we're going to pass in like this, and we're going to say path equals, and then for right now, we actually just want to do, let's just do a single / like this. This is because by default, you always want to have a path that has this path in it, because that's the default path that your app will go to when it is launched. We'll look more deeply at how the paths work in just a moment. So next, let's pass in our element path for this. Let's go ahead and do element, and then we'll do curly brackets here. And then here, since the route is going to specify our default path, or our home path basically, let's render our home page. Before we do that, we need to import all of our pages into this app.jsx file. So to import all of our pages, let's just go up to the top here, make some space, and I'm going to import each one of the pages that we have inside of our pages folder. So I'm going to import home, should autofill, and all of these should autofill here really easily. Import page 1, and then we'll just do import page 2, and then lastly, we're going to import page 3 like this. Now inside this element prop that we have here for our route, we actually want to pass in a component. So for this one, let's just pass in our home component. To do that, we would just type it like we would any other time rendering a component. So we would just type it like this. Now what this says is at the route of / here, or the path of /, we want to render the component home, which we've made its own page. If we save this, and we go ahead and save it here, now we are displaying our home page because this is the default route. To expand on this, let's go ahead and take this line here, let's copy it, and then let's paste it 3 more times. So now we have a total of 4 routes. And then let's change each of these paths and elements to render each one of our pages specifically. So for this one, we'll have this path be page 1, we'll have this path be page 2, and we'll have this path be page 3. And then we also want to render in each page corresponding to the path. So we'll do page 1 here is rendering this page. On path 2, we are rendering page 2. And then on this path to page 3, we are also rendering page 3. And then we can just go ahead and save this now. So now we've just created routes for each one of our pages. This first route here is our default route because we just use 1 / for the path. And here we're rendering the home page. This second route here that we have is for page 1. And here we render the page 1 page. And the same goes for the other 2 here. So let me show you now how this path prop actually works and how we can use it to navigate between pages. If we go over onto our site here and look at the actual URL up top left here, you can see that we have the URL, which is just the local address that we're hosting this app on. Because that's just the base URL, we're just rendering the home page right now. In the production environment, hash router here that we're using actually automatically adds a /# key here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just add that like this so that we have this ready to go. Now, because we have our path set up, we can actually just type any one of these paths we want in this URL to navigate to any of our pages. So for right now, let's do /page1 like this. Press enter, and you can see now we're looking at page 1. And because this says this is page 1, that is what we have inside of our actual page 1 component. So then let's look at, let's say page 2, for instance. I can go like this, and I can go page 2, or I could go, for instance, go here and go page 3. So basically, every single time we want to navigate to a certain path, it just needs to be equal to that in the URL. Because right here, we're typing /page 3 to get to page 3. And that's because we set up, let's go to app.jsx here, because we set up the path to render page 3 as /page 3 as so. The same logic works for /page 1 because we specified that when we say /page 1 here, we want to render the page 1. So that's basically all this is saying. And then if we just go ahead and go back to page 3 really quick, you can see that this is the same stuff that was originally on our app.jsx file, because remember, we just cut and pasted all the stuff from app into our page 3 here, hence why this is originally what we were doing. So let's go ahead and navigate back to our home page. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this /page 3 here, and now we are back to our home page. So now that we know that our navigation works, but you're probably thinking, wow, that's great and all, but nobody's ever going to type in the URL of the page they want to navigate to. Obviously, it would be ideal if we had buttons and links on our page that can navigate to other pages. So let's go ahead and add that in. React Router DOM, the exact same library we actually use to make our routes, has a super nice component called link that can easily link pages together. Let's add some links in just our home page for right now. So let's go ahead and navigate to home.jsx. And at the very top of this file, I just want to import that link out component I was just talking about. So I'm going to write import link, and then it'll say from React Router DOM. We'll just go ahead and autofill that and press enter. And now let's make links to each of our pages. To make a link to another page, all we need to do is render this link as a component here. So to do that, let's just go under our heading here, and let's just type link like this, and then it'll go ahead and autofill the closing tag. In between the tags, we can type the text we want the link to say. For this first link, we will just go ahead and write home right here. Then to specify where we want the link to go, we can add a to prop inside of our opening tag like this. We can specify a prop here. To make this to prop work, we can enter in a path here, and you want to make sure the path matches the actual path perfectly inside of our route. So for instance, in our app.jsx, we notice the path for our home page is just this / by itself. So if we want to make a link that goes to that path, we need to make sure it just matches exactly. So it would look like this, where we just have to equals, and we would do a string of /. And then let's take this and let's actually make links to all of our other pages too. So I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then we'll make links for all our pages. So I'll say path 1, path 2, I'll say path 3, and then obviously we'll change the text in here. I'll say path 1, path 2, and then path 3. And now I can go ahead and save it, and we have links to each one of our pages. Oh, and actually real quick, let me change these. I meant to do page 1 and not path here. So I'll do page 2, page 3, and then we'll change these to pages. Changes to pages. Let's go ahead and resave it. Okay, so now it looks a little better. Even though it's still an ugly blob of links here, we have home, page 1, page 2, and page 3. And these are all links to each one of our respective pages. So if we click the home page, for instance, nothing actually happens because, spoiler, we actually are on the home page right now. So it makes sense that nothing happened. But we can click page 1, and now we go to page 1. Go back to this page, click on page 2, we go to page 2, and now we can click on page 3 and then go to page 3. So that is how the link component works with React Router DOM. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's great and all, but it doesn't really help that we only have links on one of our pages, being the home page. Because that means to navigate to any of the other pages with link, we need to be on the home page. Because for instance, if we're on page 2, we no longer have the links down here. So that's a little bit inconvenient. Now there's a couple of solutions to fix this. The first one, and probably the most obvious, is that we could just copy and paste this link code here that we have into every single page, so that every single page had the exact same links. This would work, but it's not efficient to have a bunch of copied code everywhere. Instead, what we should do is build a navbar. A navbar is what you see on almost every website at the top or left side of the screen. Basically just a menu where you can click buttons that take you to separate pages. This is a lot better than copying and pasting links onto each page. To do that, it's a little bit more complex than what we've gone over so far, but it's not too much extra work, so let's go ahead and get started on it. The first thing I want to do is go ahead and just make a new navbar component. So in our components folder here, I'm just going to make a new file. I'm going to call it navbar.jsx like this. And then inside, like any other component, we'll just go ahead and write export function navbar like this. And then inside, we'll do a return statement of just empty tags for right now. And then let's take the code we wrote for our links here on our homepage. Let's take this here, and let's go ahead and cut it, and then go back into our navbar, and let's paste it inside of here. And then just so we don't actually get any errors, let's make sure we import the link, because we're going to need that. So import link from React Router DOM. And real quick, off camera, I'm going to add buttons to all of these to make it look a little bit nicer in terms of formatting. Okay, so all I did was just go ahead and make buttons inside each of these links here, just so it's formatted a little bit nicer. Now that we've done this, we've got a completely functional navbar. So how do we implement this navbar now into our code? Well, this is where things get just a little bit tricky. A navbar should be present on every single page that we have, but you don't want to have to render this navbar component into every page by copy and pasting it, because if we have many pages, this just becomes unmanageable. Navbar should exist outside of the page routes so that it renders only once as its own component and doesn't get altered by switching pages. So how can we do that? Here's what we can do, and I'll go ahead and just walk you through it. The way I usually do it goes like this. I usually make a file that I just call layout.jsx like this. This will be our own component. For now, I'm just putting it in the root source directory. And then inside of this, I'll just make it as a component. We'll do export function layout like this. And then we'll just go ahead and do like a simple return for now, just like this. And then what we want to do is import the navbar that we just created. So let's import navbar. It should autofill like that. And then I want to import one more thing from React Router DOM called outlet. So I'll go ahead and import this outlet, and I'll explain what this does in just a second. And then inside this layout component, let's go ahead and render our navbar first as a component. And then let's just make a main tag here. And then inside of this, we're going to render the outlet tag that we just made. So I've done all this kind of fast. Now let me explain actually how all of this works. So we made a layout component, and inside of it, we are first rendering our navbar that we just created a moment ago. And this will actually show our navbar to the user. What makes the real magic happen is this outlet tag down here. What outlet does is basically just renders all the child routes of whatever route this layout is in. So what that means is that we can put layout as a parent route to the rest of the routes. And then all of our pages that we have, like home, page 1, page 2, page 3, will all just be children to this layout. This outlet is dynamic and will become whatever routes are under it. So in our case, this outlet will become all of our other routes. This allows for the navbar to exist outside of the other routes, hence why we are rendering it on its own right here. Let me show you how to implement this now into our app.jsx routes if it's still kind of confusing. We only need to make one simple change in our app.jsx file to just make this work. So let's first import the layout component that we just made. So let's import layout, autofill, and we'll import it like this. And then what we need to do is make another route down here, but we want to make sure it has an opening and a closing tag this time. So let's make a route like this. And then what we want to do, let's make space here. And then I'm going to take all these old routes here. I'm just going to cut them, and I'm going to paste them inside here like this. And then lastly, let's take this here. Let's make an element prop here. And for the element prop, we just want to pass in the layout component we just made, like this. Let me explain how this works. As you can see, we wrapped all of our previous routes inside this singular route tag here. That is just rendering layout. So all of these routes that we have here are now child routes of this layout route up top. So what this means is that if we go to our actual layout component here, this layout component is rendering navbar up top, right? And then right here, we are rendering outlet. We just saw that the child routes to this layout component are equal to all of these 4, meaning that in this layout component, all those 4 routes now become this outlet component here, meaning that outlet now will just render all 4 of those routes. And the reason why we do this is because now the navbar exists outside of the other 4 routes that we have. So now let's go ahead and let's just save this file here. Let's save app.jsx. And then let's go ahead and go into navbar and save that as well. We'll just make sure everything is saved here. Let's go save all. And then now you can see we have 4 buttons here, one for each one of our pages. And each one of these buttons is coming from our navbar component here, because each one of these is a link, and then each one of the links we have a button that corresponds to each page. Now I can click any one of these 4 buttons, which all come from our navbar component, and it'll take us to any of the pages that we want. So I can click on page 1, it'll take us to page 1. I can click page 2, it'll take us to page 3. I can click on page 3, and it'll take us to page 3. So I didn't copy and paste these links to every single one of our pages. So we know for certain that this navbar we have here right now exists outside of our page routes. And now we've got a fully functioning navigation system with multiple routes that lead to multiple pages. Now that all the setup is done, we can add, remove, and edit different pages however we want. Let's say I want to add a new page now and just call it page 4. I can go here, I can say page4.jsx, and then I'll make a new component. I'll just say export function page 4. And then I'll just return tags here. And inside of this, I'll just make a header that says this is page 4 like this. Go ahead and save it. And then once I have this page created that I want to add, all I need to do is edit 2 files, app.jsx and then navbar.jsx. In app.jsx, all I need to do is import this page that we just made. And then I could just make a new route for it down here. So I could just go routes. Actually, I'll just copy and paste this so it's faster. Just like any other route we have, I could copy and paste this, make this route or path page 4, and then make the element we're rendering equal to page 4. And then the last thing we would need to do is just go ahead and go to our navbar here, and let's add another link for the page we just created. So we can go here, go like this, page 4, and then page 4 like this, save it, and now we've added something on our navbar to go to page 4. If we click it, we go to this page 4 component we have just made. So now we have just successfully added a page to our site. This process would be the same for any time we wanted to add a page. All we need to do is actually write the page itself, what we've done here. We need to import it into our app and then add it as a route. And then we would just need to alter our navbar to have that button be showing for that page. If we wanted to remove pages, the process is just the opposite of what we just did. We would just need to delete the route from our app.jsx file. So for instance, if we want to get rid of page 4, we could just delete this line here. And then we would just go into our navbar and then delete it from here as well. And then we would have successfully just deleted a page basically. And if we want to edit any of the pages, now we can just go to any of our pages folder, access any of the files we want, and then edit them however we like. For example, if on page 1 here, we go to page 1, we don't like how this looks. We want to say this is the very first page. Go and delete this here, save it, and we've now modified the very first page. So any edits you want to make, you can just do inside the pages themselves, just like we would before with any other component. And with that, we're going to wrap up today's episode. In this episode, you learned how to use React Router to make multi-page web applications. You learned how to craft different pages, import and render them into app.jsx, and you learned how to navigate between pages using a custom-made navbar that exists outside of all the other pages. In the very next episode, we'll combine everything we've learned so far into a sample project. We'll build a basic web application from scratch using everything we know. I will see you in the next one.